Welcome to Get the Facts, the program that provides you with information on government's policies and initiatives. I'm your host, Enthros Campbell. Jamaica's preparedness to respond to natural disasters such as hurricanes, floods, or earthquakes is critical to our recovery process. As such, the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management, ODPEM, has to ensure that efforts are strategically coordinated. On today's program, we look at some of the measures in place for the 2019 hurricane season with Acting Director General Richard Thompson. Sir, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So good to have you. You know, we tend to think that OPM just gets into motion when we have hurricanes, but I know that your function, your role and function is a lot more. Tell us about
Well, I'm happy you say that because yes. I think that's a running joke with a lot of my friends that always say to me that whenever time is the 1st of June, they say, well, your work just start. But our work does not just start at the beginning of the hurricane season. The age, based on the mandate of the organization, is we deal with all hazards. So whatever that can cause a disaster is the responsibility of the ODPEM to coordinate that event. By our mandate, we are the National Disaster Coordinator. And within that process, we have agencies that have first responders responsibilities, such as the Jamaica Fire Brigade. So ODPEM sits in what we call a National Disaster Organization. And within the organization, you have a number of players within the national process to include ministries, departments, and agencies of the state. So basically, it's an all-encompassing process. And the history of the ODPEM would go back to 1980. The agency started in 1980, just after the 1979 flood event. And we have been growing ever since. We have a legislative process. We have a national disaster plan. And we ensure that there is a comprehensive national planning and disaster risk management strategy that looks at your response coordination, looks at mitigation and preparedness, and looks at how, if we are impacted from an emergency, how we look at rehabilitation, recovery, reconstruction.
Right. So, like, what is happening like now? What do you do on a day-to-day basis?
Well, the day-to-day procedures in the ODPEM is constant work. We, as I said before, we have an all-hazard mandate. There's a lot of plan development, plan preparation, looking at aspects of policies, looking at how the agency fit within the national development process. Under Vision 2030, we have major responsibility under Outcome 14, looking at hazard risk reduction and adaptation to climate change. So it's constant work every day, looking at your overall mandate that deals with preparation and mitigation measures. A lot of the work that we do goes all the way down to the community level, really where the rubber hits the road. From a national, our response process, and also our national framework, we have three levels: the national, regional, and community. So national, parish, and community, I should say. So we have, at the national level, the National Disaster Risk Management Council, which is chaired by the Most Honorable Prime Minister. You have a parish mechanism, which is chaired by the mayors, and it goes down to what we call zonal communities within the communities of parishes, where there's also a risk management framework there as well. So we go from national, parish to local to ensure that the work is being done and that we are impacting the communities and impacting the people within the country.
All right. So tell me about your response. Something happens and you get into motion. For example, not a hurricane, because we're going to come to that later. Mm-hmm. But tell me about the required response and public steps.
Well, if something major happens, no, we're not talking about earthquake, but earthquake is always on the mind of Jamaicans because we are extremely vulnerable to earthquakes. So say, for instance, we should be impacted by an earthquake. We would activate the National Emergency Operations Center. The requirement for the activation of that center is set out in our National Disaster Plan. The Most Honorable Prime Minister is the one that gives instruction to activate the National Emergency Operations Center upon our recommendation, that is. And once that is activated, you have a number of players that will sit in the National Emergency Operations Center, which is housed at the Union Road headquarters of the ODPEM, and we have all these liaison personnel sitting in that operations center, and a lot of the coordination goes out from the National Emergency Operations Center, and we get information. Information goes both top down and bottom up, coming from the areas of impact. So if there is a major, say, after the earthquake, we have secondary events from earthquakes. So if there's a major fire happening and the fire brigade have to be there to doing your fire response, there are collapsed buildings, they have to be doing search and rescue. All those information will be feeding from the ground itself into the Emergency Operations Center, and we are giving information and we are coordinating as to what is needed. Coordination with health, if there is health response, coordination with the works agency, police from a matter of security, and crowd control, traffic control, you name it. That's basically how it happens. And the National Emergency Operations Center takes precedence in the overall coordination of the event.
So talk to me a little bit more about the different agencies, because you have to coordinate with other agencies, as you said, the NAA, maybe the fire department, definitely fire department, and water commission, and so on. Talk to me a little bit more of that, about that coordination.
So in as part of the national process, we have what is called a national response matrix, and the matrix itself sets out, based on events, who are the lead, who are the support entities. And so that's how the operation is effective or affected. So each entity of the state have specific roles and responsibility that they have to perform, that is outlined in the National Disaster Plan. So you can break it down from an earthquake, hurricane, road traffic accidents, marine type accidents, air accidents. It basically sets it. Traffic. Yeah. You can have major traffic accident that you have 20, 30, 40 persons dying. So it's all the disasters that you can think about. We have responsibility.
And you're satisfied that we're prepared.
Well, preparation is.
We'll talk a little bit more about that.
We'll talk about that.
Yes, when we come back. We're talking disaster preparedness with Acting Director General of OPM, Richard Thompson. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Get the Facts. We continue our discussion with Richard Thompson, who is the Acting Director General of OPM. Mr. Thompson, we are in the hurricane season. What kind of season are we expecting?
Well, yes, we're in the hurricane season, and we all know that the hurricane season extends from June 1 to November 30th. Yes. Based on the prediction that came out of the National Hurricane Center, and what was given by our local Met Office, who works in close collaboration with the National Hurricane Center, we are expecting what is called a near normal season. So the meteorologists are saying that we're expecting roughly about 30% above. It could be 30% above normal or 30% below normal. The prediction for the season is for about 9 to 15 storms, 9 to 15 named storms, 4 to 8 to be hurricanes, and 2 to 4 to be major hurricane. You're talking about Cat 4, Cat 5. So that's the season that we're expecting. For us, the most active part of the season is normally in August to September. So if you look at our hurricane history, that's when we would have been impacted. Your Gilbert, Matthew, Gustav, TD16 that a lot of persons call Nicole. It's normally in that part of the season, which is the most active part of the season. So for small island developing state like ours, we normally say persons have to be prepared because it takes only one system to create major impact. So you don't have to be impacted by 2-3 storms. You can, and it don't have to be a hurricane or a tropical storm for that matter. It can just be an adverse rainfall event, which Nicole was, TD16. When it was passed in Jamaica, it was actually
TD meaning tropical
depression. Meaning tropical depression. It was actually tropical depression number 16. So when storm systems are developing, you move from like invest to a tropical depression to a
From
tropical
invest?
Yes. So it's part of the meteorological definitions.
Languages.
So when it becomes a tropical depression, it has a number. When it becomes a storm, which is a tropical storm, it gets a name. And so for TD16, which eventually developed into Nicole, it was just it brought just a lot of rainfall to Jamaica, and we were extremely impacted. I think we had about 2 persons dying from that event. So because of our levels of vulnerability and our levels of exposure, it is important that we're always putting in measures to ensure that the country is prepared.
Yes.
And preparedness is not just about the workings of the ODPEM. It's a comprehensive working across all the fabric and apparatus of the national system.
Since you know that we are not usually prepared, how prepared are you to help us?
You mean help in the JS?
Yeah. I mean, no, the country.
The country,
people are
general.
saying, no, boy, them don't see any rain and so on, so they're not prepared. How prepared
Not seeing any rain now is because we're having a drought.
Yes.
The meteorological science, it changes in very short time. You can move from a drought condition to having severe flooding.
Yes, right.
So it's to ensure that the work or the workings is always continuing.
Right.
And we work in close collaboration with the local authorities, the parish councils, the works
agencies. Tell me about some of the things that you have in place to in the event we are hit by a hurricane.
So a lot of it is a part is to ensure that your systems do work. And that you're exercising your system, and that persons have a clear picture, a clear operation picture of their roles and responsibilities. So yes, we would have a national store that we have supplies, your what we call comfort items, cots, blankets, you name that, some generators, GP tents, those kind of things that we have in store. And then the other agencies will be doing their work as well, ensuring that there's drain rehabilitation. We're doing a lot of work in the country as it relates to enhancing our road infrastructure, to ensure that our road infrastructure are robust enough that we don't have significant flooding, because those road infrastructure would have new and improved drain that we're doing a national drainage plan that should look at new capacity, new size for drains, to ensure that there's not a lot of flooding in our urban space. So we have been doing a lot of that work. Yes. Enhancement in terms of the JDF, enhancement in terms of the Jamaica Fire Brigade, the Jamaica Fire Brigade. We have, on average, a little bit over 900 shelters nationally, and we do early in the season and as best as possible, sometime throughout the season, shelter assessment to determine whether we are keeping those that we have as shelters, and we are taking out some that we have on the books now as shelters. And what normally happens is that a lot of our schools are used as shelters. One of the thinking behind that is because the school should have a design capability and a capacity so that it can withstand a lot of events, because you know that it holds our most vulnerable population for a very long period of time.
Yes. When do you decide to open a shelter? When do you spring into action?
So once once we're activated, then you have given all the notification, then you would expect that the shelters the shelter managers are activated, and they would try to, as best as possible, open the shelters, because they don't want to be trying to open a shelter during the event. Yes. Especially during a hurricane. You want to ensure that the shelters are open in advance. So once you're saying to persons, if you live in low-lying areas, you need to evacuate, you must have the shelters open for persons to go into the shelters.
Speak to Jamaica as it relates to us preparing ourselves.
Well, as I said, not seeing any rain is because we're in a drought. But as I said, it takes only one, so you have to ensure that there is constant preparation. Persons should ensure that they have their family disaster plan. Yeah. Not a lot of us look at that, to ensure that you have a family disaster plan, your family know where, if something major happened, where they should meet up, that you have, as best as possible, your supplies in home, you're checking your roofs. Know that it is
It is
a dry
dry,
spell, you
yes.
might not know if you have
Yes.
some kind of leakage, or you need to do some reinforcement or retrofitting of your roofs.
Okay. Okay.
Check for trees that are close in proximity to your homes. Do some prunings.
We have to wrap now, but it was a real pleasure speaking with you, and I guess we have to do another program.
Yes,
Thank you so
very
much. This has been Get the Facts with our guest, Richard Thompson, Acting Director General of the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management, OPM. Until next time, I'm your host, Enthros Campbell. Take good care.